thank our friends over at Deepwater Wind. Lots of things going on today. Lots and lots of storm preparation as we're expecting the third big northeaster of March, I guess, expected to hit. And our meteorologist, John Giorsi, says it is going to be a big one. And if you know John Giorsi, he's always on the conservative side. We're going to talk with Liz Tanner from Department of Business Regulation up first. Is Liz in the house? Liz? Liz?
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Good
Great
to
see you. So you are in charge of functionally the regulatory functions overseeing businesses in Rhode Island.
For the most part, yes.
All right, and you are both beloved and cursed, I guess, on a regular basis.
Yes.
But you're trying to sort of work, the governor's had a big initiative to try and strip out some of the regulatory red tape, as it's called. Talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that you guys are working on.
Well, we originally went out and talked to lots and lots of business owners. So
You did not talk to us, I'm just saying.
we went to over 400 events, mostly trade organization meetings, chambers of commerce, merchants associations, anybody we could think of that had sort of groups of businesses in a room. We talked to over 4,000 either business owners or workers, and we said, what is it that makes you crazy? What is it that is a problem for you? And interesting part to us is, while sometimes it is the regulations,
Sure.
and sometimes it is the laws, it is far more about cutting the paperwork, right?
Yeah.
The burdensome paperwork, it is the poor processes, bad customer service, and more often than not, it's how am I supposed to know?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to know where to find things out? So that's what we've been trying to work on with the Office of Regulatory Reform. They are doing a process where they go through all of the regulations, cutting out 3,800 pages so far, I believe, and ultimately it's all going to be online so that you can search it. So when you want to become a plumber and you want to know what you have to do, you can put in plumber and it'll all pop up for you. So that is going to be huge, because right now it's really hard to find out what the regulations are that relate to your profession.
There's a ton of them, and they all vary, and they're all complex. I think one of them that there was a little bit of reform on that drives maybe every business owner in Rhode Island insane is that, especially when you have multiple LLCs, is that an LLC has to pay an annual fee of, now it's $450. It used to be $500. And I'm not sure how many we have, but we probably have 3 or 4 in Rhode Island. And it might be the most absurd requirement. Are we gonna see any changes on that one?
Well, first we're down to 400. It was at
Oh, is it down to
500.
400?
Yep, it went down to 450, and now we're down at 400.
Excellent.
There are only 2 states in the country that don't charge it, so as
Yeah.
much as it's really annoying, know that pretty much every other state does require it. And yes, it is a challenge, because a lot of people don't know they have to pay it. That's
Right.
the hard part.
Yeah.
So if you don't necessarily have a good tax preparer, or know that you have to pay it, it's very hard to even know that you have to pay it. So yes, we are looking at reducing it, we're looking at getting rid of it. There's a lot of things we're looking to do there, and I would really like to make a change because I think that would be dramatic. You know, it's something that everybody has to be.
Well, it limits innovation, because a lot of times you have businesses who want to spin off something and create a separate LLC. And one of the barriers is I'm not sure it's going to work. Do I really want to spend, all those steps and things like that? Talk a little bit, and we're going to come back to cleaning up the regulatory structure. Talk a little bit about your scope. DBR, Department of Business Regulation, is one of these small departments that have massive requirements. Just about everybody falls under you, it seems like, sometimes.
Well, and most people think they do.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, we only have what we have, right?
Yeah.
So we have banking. We have all the banks.
That's a big category.
Big category.
You've got the credit unions.
We have the credit unions. We have all the insurance providers, and there's
Yeah.
lots of different kinds of insurance.
Right.
So we have the insurance providers.
Including healthcare.
The
Blue
Office
Crosses.
of Healthcare Commissioner, yes, they do fall under the DVR umbrella.
Yeah.
We also have commercial licensing, and that really takes sort of the potpourri of licensing. We have liquor for breweries and things like that.
Yeah.
Not liquor licenses for restaurants, that's a local issue.
Yeah.
But we also have marijuana, that's very interesting, of course. We have auto body shops, we have, securities, we have this wide range of other kinds of business types, so engineers, accountants, land surveyors.
Do you have hair braiders?
We do not.
That's health department?
Well, That is under the cosmetology,
Uh-huh.
under Department of Health, but we are proposing to bring it to DBR.
Excellent.
So we would like to try to take the 13-page application to become a hairdresser, try to reduce that down to something that's a little more tolerable, and put the forms online. So we're striving to do that in the governor's budget this year.
Excellent. Talk about one of the things we've written about numerous times and talked to Mike DiBiase's office a number of times about is and I'm gonna put it in the most positive structure. Rhode Island is just behind in applying technology to things like this. You know, we operate in other states, we have other GoLocals, and in those states, so many of them, so much of the business you do with the state can be done online. And in Rhode Island, it's getting better, but so little of it can be done online. How do we jumpstart that? I mean, a lot of these things that just become an amazing nuisance and have to be costly. There's some things we get mailings from regulatory structures that have nothing to do with our business, but we're on some list somehow, and we get one of these mailings every quarter. It has nothing to do with our business. I mean, I don't care if it's 30 cents that the state has to. We've gotten them for 8 years since we've been in business, and we've probably got, 1,000 mailings. Talk a little bit about how we can speed up that process to help businesses and cut down state expense.
We've actually done a lot in that space in the last few years. The Department of Business Regulation is actually one of the, if not the only, state agency where every form you need to do with us is online to fill out in the first
Who
place.
knows this? When are you going to tell somebody?
And to renew. So every single thing that DBR covers is completely electronic.
It's all Matt Sheaf's fault. I'm putting it straight out. Nobody knows, and it's Sheaf's fault.
You also, at the Department of Health, while most of your forms are not available to do originally, you can renew just about everything online.
Okay.
So at least you can renew things. Secretary of State's office, as you know, is fantastic. They've got everything online.
It's better.
From day one to the end. But of note, there's been two efforts that I think you'll find particularly interesting. First, municipalities. So we've done an initiative, $3,000 initiative, where the state pays $1,000, the Rhode Island Foundation feels strongly enough about it that they've paid $1,000, and the community pays $1,000 or less, depending on the size of the community. And we've had 23 communities go through this, where they streamlined the business registration and licensing process. And instead of me as a business owner having to go from one place, fill out a form, write a check, next place, fill out a form, write a check, over and over and over again, they've now created one singular form that says, this is what I'm doing, this is whatever my business type is. The form goes out to whoever it needs to go out to, and then they all work with each other, so that I don't have to go from place to place to place. That has been going on for about a year, 2 years now. Some communities are now putting that form online so that you can order online and you can do things that way. For example, in the city of Pawtucket, to open up a restaurant, it used to take 11 visits to City Hall, at a minimum, 11 visits. Now, with this new form and this new system that they've set up, it's 0. Yeah, they kind of still want you to come in once, but really it's one visit to go in, and everything at least is in motion. So rather than you having to go from place to place to place, now it's all online, or I'm talking to somebody, or we're emailing, whatever it might be.
Providence has not adopted that similar streamlined structure.
While they may not have adopted the streamlined structure, they are putting far more of their licenses onto an online system. In fact, the system that they're using is a software called Viewpoint, and the reason they have it is because we have electronic permitting. So the state of Rhode Island now has 22 municipalities who are doing their fire and building permits online. What's particularly interesting about that is the municipality is connected to the state. As far as we know, this is the only state in the country that's doing this, so that when you want to order a permit in Providence, and you're having to coordinate with building and fire, you're all talking to each other. So you can see that it went from John to Mary to Bob, and you can see where it's at so that you can reach out and have that interaction. So the feedback that we've heard is that it makes it a whole lot easier because they can do it from their phones if they really want to. It makes it transparent so they can see where it is, and it just makes business a whole lot easier because
Can the public see it as well?
You can go in and have access to the same information you used to have. But I, as the applicant, I can go in and see where it's at.
Okay. And talk a little bit about some of the other reforms you've got before the legislature this year. You've got kind of a package to try and advance some of these initiatives. Walk us through those.
So we talked about how we went out and talked to everybody, right? And it was interesting because in the beginning we were really out to talk about all the programs and services that Commerce offers, because very few people know what the Commerce Corporation does for small and local businesses. And we started hearing their complaints and their concerns. And it's funny, I started literally just writing it down. on a piece of paper. And then we kind of advanced to an Excel spreadsheet, and then we realized we were on to some really important information about things that we wanted to change and make better. So that's what this bill is. It's between 15 and 22, depending on how you count it, small changes to make it easier to do business. So a lot of it is the removal of notarization requirements, so that we can put the forms
Right.
online, because if it has to be notarized, you can't put it online. We don't have that ability. So that's a big part of it. But it's also things like, if you become a food safety manager, which pretty much every restaurant has to have one of them,
Yeah.
you used to have to get licensed every 3 years. We're
Right.
trying to make it every 5 years. There was a fee that's been $500, that Massachusetts is $300. We're reducing that fee. If you live in a mobile home park and want to file a complaint against the mobile home park owner, you have to pay a $25 fee just to file the complaint. Seems a little crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, that would seem to be a regressive tax against generally people who are lower income.
So we're trying to
be
get rid
able
of that fee. But my personal favorite is the frozen desserts.
The frozen desserts.
Frozen
The
desserts.
frozen dessert regulation.
Yes, well, it's, yes, so basically, if you have one of these machines
Yeah.
that the frozen margarita or the ice cream comes out of, in addition to everything you have to pay a $160 fee to have that machine. However, there's a reason for it. Back in, I guess, the 60s or 70s, when you had those ice cream machines, they were all copper pipes.
Yeah.
And copper pipes and ice cream make sense. But when they switched to the world of slushies, the acid from the juice and the copper pipes, bad combination,
Yeah.
kids were getting sick the second they were drinking the
Right.
slushies. So they created this license so that they knew who had the ice cream machines, so they could make sure that they had the proper tubing and that they weren't putting slushies in the bad pipes, because kids were getting sick. So it makes sense. It makes sense
Well,
why they
listen,
did it.
most regulations came at a time in response to something that went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Totally understand that. We've written the, 100 worst bills in Rhode Island, most outdated, absurd, some of them go back to colonial times. But isn't that really the issue, is that nobody goes through on a regular basis and goes through and, what is it, Nebraska, every other year, you can only repeal legislation, I think it is. One of the states, every other year, you can only repeal a law. You can't pass a new law, which seems to make some sense, because there's endless numbers. And during my time in state government and working out with the legislature, you've been there, you've seen it. The legislators want to do something to address a problem, but they don't want to staff it. They don't want to put any resources into it. There's no funding source for it. So then the regulatory structure gets thinner and thinner and creates some problems in inspection and fairness and those types of things. So when you see all these after going through this process, how many of the, excuse me, did your toes just curl at, that you just said, oh my God, we've got to get these done and get rid of these as quickly as possible?
Oh, there's plenty, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why it's so exciting for me to work under the Vermont administration to try to make changes that I know make business owners crazy.
Yeah.
A great example was the biggest complaint that I suffered as a business owner and heard from so many of my colleagues and other business owners was trying to get the letter of good standing from the Division of Taxation. The biggest frustration that all business owners
Yeah.
felt. You needed taxation to basically prove that you've paid your taxes off.
Right.
And to try to get that form was such a challenge. What we did a couple years ago was to co-fund an event where they went through what's called a lean streamlining event, where they said, okay, it used to take this amount of time and we want to get to this amount of time. So they were averaging about 97 days
Oh my God.
on average to get that.
And when you need it because you're refinancing or
Lots of
you're,
different things.
right, so time is of the essence in many cases,
Yes.
and their average time period was 97 days?
97 days.
Yeah, that's a deal
Yeah.
killer.
Now we're down to 23 days, and they're
23
still
days.
working harder to get, that puts us in line with what most states do. They are trying to do a lot more to make that easier. We're really trying to encourage them to get their forms online too,
Yeah.
so that we can avoid a lot of that back and forth that you experience when you're trying to get that. But so that's been a dramatic change. That is probably the biggest complaint we used to hear. I think we dealt with cases of those, several a week, especially towards the end of the year when you're really trying to get it done. And now we're lucky if we get one a month. We just don't get these complaints very often anymore.
Yeah. A lot of the regulations, I remember previous to launching a media company, owned ad agencies, and one of the regulations was for how the revenue taxed folks in the advertising and what functions were taxable versus which weren't. And the descriptions of those that they claimed were taxable talked about technology that was 20, 30 years old, that an ad would get cut up and posted on a board, which hadn't been done in decades. Actually, I'd never worked in that industry. accordingly. So how do you, is there any kind of regulatory review of the regulations in any macro sense to be able to go through and help all the departments? And by the way, you know, taxation isn't built for writing the regulations about the advertising industry any more than I am about writing the tax regulations. And so that process took years for them to correct it. Are those outdated regulations across the board being looked at?
Yes, so through the process called the APA, they have to review every single regulation between now and, I believe, August.
Okay.
They've already repealed about 3,800 pages of regulations.
So that's a full 1%? No, just teasing.
Well, of note, one that people were really excited about was the mimosas.
The mimosa regulation?
The mimosa regulation, as that's what we call it at least. It used to be that you could not sell liquor before noon,
Yes.
and the regulations changed, and now you can sell liquor on Sundays.
Right.
So we call it the mimosa change.
I believe both Molly and Kate cheered for the repeal of the mimosa regulation. Now, you'd been in business,
Yes.
and then you came and worked at Commerce on the program side, and then went over to DBR. What's the difference you see between, you know, being in business and operating a department in state government?
I think it goes back to the how am I supposed to know? How
Yeah.
am I supposed to know I need to do this? How am I supposed to know I need to do that? There are so many either rules or regulations or laws that you have to follow, and it's really hard to find that information out. So even hiring someone to do that for you still doesn't make it easy. So that's probably the biggest piece, is just not knowing where to go to how to find that information. So we are trying to create checklists to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to create more sort of frequently asked questions on websites so that you can have this information, so that you have that. It's just that it's so much. There's so much, right?
Yeah.
So to your last question, the best thing that people can do is two things. One, join an association.
Mhm.
Business owners join an association, whether it's a chamber, merchant association, trade organization, because you now have people who can relay your concerns. And the second part of it is you need to relay your concerns, right? You can't complain about business stuff without telling anybody about it, because when we hear about it, we try to do what we can do to fix it. There's no way we can fix and make everything better, but we've made great progress, I think. The complaint volume, again, has dropped dramatically, but it's a whole lot easier when the business owners tell us what the problem is. And we don't expect them to say, well, I have a problem with regulation XYZ. They usually say, this is my problem, and then we do the research to figure out what it is. But you've got to get that word out. Tell us what the problems are, and we can tell you. And I'll tell you that very often people will come to complain to us, and we'll say, well, no, actually you can do that, or you can't do that,
Yeah.
which is in your favor. So we find that quite a bit.
Do you have folks who specialize in sort of meandering, helping small businesses meander their way through the regulatory process? And if so, how do people access that?
So at the Commerce Corporation, there have always been a team of people who are there to assist business owners. So what we'll do is make an appointment. We'll either do it by phone or email, or you can sit down and meet and say, what's your situation? Are you starting? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to go international? Are you really in a bind, having troubles? And they can let you know about all the resources that are out there, because there are a ton of resources that nobody knows about.
Right.
And a lot of them are free, if not most of them. So there's just a ton of resources out there, whether it's counseling, mentoring, classes. There's just a ton of information out there for business owners. They just have a really hard time accessing it. So actually, we've created what we call the Small Business Hotline.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a dedicated phone number. We've always
Stefan Pryor answers this personally.
sometimes maybe
Yeah,
when
yeah.
we're a little overwhelmed, but it's
He picks it up and says, what can I do for you?
So-
Let me.
so 521-HELP is
Yeah.
the number. There are a team of people, again, always there to
They're
answer
in
phones.
Rhode Island.
They're in Rhode
Okay,
Island.
good, thank God.
They're in Rhode Island, and they will see what your situation is, and they'll help you out. If you want to complain about a business issue, that's the place to send that information as well.
And can they help you? These are folks at Commerce.
Yep.
And can these folks help you meander your way, find guidance through other state departments as well? Or is this just limited to the programs of Commerce?
Yes, if they want the hand-holding, we'll hand-hold them through the service.
Okay.
So we've had a couple of very interesting medical companies who want to come to Rhode Island.
Right.
And they need to work with the Department of Health, but they're not quite sure where in the Department of Health, because they're something entirely new or different. So we've done a lot of hand-holding in that space, where we get them in front of the right people who might not be the right person, but they'll help connect us to the right person. And then we're hand-holding through the process to say, all right, what kind of license do you need? Same thing with municipalities. Sometimes they're not quite sure where they want to move their business to, and we'll kind of help shop that around for them. So they'll do as much as a quick answer to spending months together working on a problem.
And are you seeing any adverse impact in cutting through the red tape with the early retirements, where you start losing huge amounts of institutional knowledge of senior people who've been in departments for 20 plus years, who kind of know the shortcuts to everything? Have you seen any implications from that? I remember I was in state government during the first and biggest one under Sunland, and it took a good year for the state to kind of flush its way out and get the right people back in the right places.
It depends on the agency, right?
Yeah.
So I have heard stories of maybe one or two agencies where they're really losing some very valuable members. But I do think it gives an opportunity to bring in a fresh set of eyes and a fresh mind. So, it's definitely a blessing and a curse at the same time.
What are you most proud of in some of these regulatory changes?
That letter of good standing was really a
Yeah.
big win. So very, very exciting that. One of the other things we're trying to do is make it easier to open up a restaurant.
Yeah.
So we have taken the time to say this is what it used to take, and this is a simplified version. What was interesting to us is it's not a dramatic change.
Mhm.
It was more about providing these are all the things you could potentially have to do so that you don't get tripped up later on further down. So we're really excited about, we're pretty close, a couple of months away from providing a roadmap of sorts that says this is how you open up a restaurant. So we're really excited about that.
And then it'll guide you through each of the communities and their related complexities, or is it just limited to the state structure?
It connects you with the municipalities. It's going to be up to the municipality to provide us with the information on the local level, but it pulls everything together for the state, and it's the construction piece of it too. So it's not just the food piece. If your restaurant's going to be on the water, that presents a whole new set of problems.
Absolutely.
So we'll be capturing that as well.
Biggest frustration?
Sometimes it's the amount of time it takes to get something done. It can take a long time by design. You don't want to make dramatic change for certain areas of government that
Locating a
take too long.
nuclear power plant, maybe we want that process to go a little slower, a few more eyeballs on it. But, somebody who is trying to open up a French fry place down at the beach ought to be able to. I know there's some grease issues and some venting, but it really shouldn't take months and months and years and years.
There's been, I think probably early on in my tenure over at the Commerce Corporation, there was not as quick of a response in pretty much across the board. Now we have Amica, our insurance company up in Lincoln. They have been doing free customer service training for state employees.
Oh, that's great.
And you have seen a dramatic turnaround in the response times, in the customer service, and also to a certain extent, once you all start talking about it, everybody gets a little happier at their job. Now, I'm not gonna say everybody's
absolutely.
happy, but
Yeah,
by doing
no,
that,
absolutely.
yeah, it's been great.
And they have a better understanding of what the importance of their job is. I think the next barrier is the municipalities, where you see a significantly different level of professionalism.
Well, for those 23
accordingly.
communities that
Yeah.
we did the streamlining event, Roger Williams University actually did do a customer service training for them as well. So we've seen quite a few people really, it opens up a conversation. It allows for people to talk about changes that can be made, and we are finding that the municipalities are for the most part really on board to excited to make change as well.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody, everybody is stretched to limits. Everybody is busy. As a person who runs a business, the more things that can be done online, can be paid online, can be, 30 seconds versus, 3 weeks of rounds and abouts and all the others, I think is a huge plus. And, I'll also say, sometimes we hear from folks from government come on and say, well, this will make us as blank to other states. Saul Kaplan's going to be on, who's a champion of innovation. Maybe, maybe we should be the best. We have this advantage, and we talk about it on many a Monday about Rhode Island being this great place, this great incubator space to be able to do things. This is some of the things that Rhode Island can literally be the best at going. So,
And that's why we're really excited about the electronic permitting, to be the first state in the country that we know of that has the municipality connected to the state to do an interaction. We don't think that happens anywhere else.
that'd be great. I want to thank you, Liz,
Yep.
for coming on. It was great, and congratulations on the success you've been having so far. Look forward to seeing more of it and keeping us up to date on it. And pretty much, I think I feel comfortable saying anything that has gone wrong in this process, please blame on Matt Schief over at Commerce, because I think it's fully responsible for any of those failures. We're going to be right back with Saul Kaplan from Business Innovation Factory. We'll be back in about 1 minute. Thank you.